So let's start with the nerfs. Oh my. I'm Agamatsu and I ruined Deep Pokken. I'll give you guys an alternative option. Okay, I'll give you guys an alternative option. A lot of people looked at me like the numbers I suggested was crazy. So I'm gonna give you the calculations for a mantra that actually has already had this effect. The thing I suggested was kind of like this, right? Where it was like kind of like this. But surprisingly, there's already a mantra that basically does this, right? No joke. There's a mantra that is essentially this. Some of you guys may have already guessed it. We were talking today about the example Stormblades, right? So I think Stormblades is the perfect example of a mantra that has a very harsh scaling, extremely harsh. It would be worse than the logarithmic one past 8 modifiers, and it has a spark variant that actually doesn't follow the rule. A good example, right, is the fact that it has tornado spark and the base variant. The base variant can be extended completely. There is no modifiers on it, right? Let me tell you what my rule was. So my rule, as I was saying before, was it was, what is it, like at 3, was it 3, 6, 8, and like 16, right? I was saying it was like what, 25 here, it was like what, 50 here for 6, it was 65 here, and at 16 it was 80, right? So the rule Stormblades follows is that no matter what size modifier, Cloud or Stratus, every modifier is minus 7.5% damage. Every modifier, right? And so the maximum reduced at 8 modifiers is minus 60% less damage. That is the rule it follows. So at 3 modifiers, Stormblades loses 22.5% damage. That is how much, what is it called? 3 modifiers loses. At 6 modifiers, Stormblades loses 45% damage. And then at 8, it loses minus 60%. So Stormblades is already a mantra that follows this rule, and is a perfect example of a mantra that, even though it can be made extremely massive, right, it is still usable by a lot of people. A lot of people use also the variant that doesn't have any size modifiers. I think it's a perfect example of a lot of choice in a mantra. I think it's a good example of why I don't think it's actually a super negative change necessarily. And so what I wanted to also bring up was I wanted to give an example of Shadowgun. A lot of people come up to me and they're like, Agamatsu. By the way, if you're wondering, the damage I tested for Stormblade was like 33. At max modifiers was 13. It dropped from 33 to 13 damage from base to max 8 modifiers, right? What is it? What's it called? Now, what is my proposition? What am I trying to say for Shadowgun, right? Shadowgun has, for the blast spark, I probably should have clarified, for the blast spark, has extremely high range, right? So blast spark Shadowgun, BSSG, right? For the blast spark version of Shadowgun, I was testing it. I believe the base damage is somewhere around like 65 at 80 Shadowcast, and it's like 70 with Ring of Casters, right? So Ring of Casters, this is 80 Shadow, 0 Song Chant, and this is with the Ring of Casters. It does 65 damage. Even if it followed the rule, in my opinion, right? Even if you had a bunch of modifiers on it, you would still be able, so the example I gave was like 5 modifiers, it would still be dealing 42 damage, which is, in my opinion, it's an incredibly big mantra. Even with those 5 modifiers, I tested 3 Stratus, 2 Perfect. It still dealt 42 damage at a pretty big range. I was actually shocked that Stormblades had this much of a damage modification. I thought it would be, I knew it was a lot, but I didn't expect to be damn near so close to the chart I gave. Example was, your chart just makes Neuro Overload the worst sound in the game. I disagree. I think the thing about Neuro Overload is that it gives you the opportunity to use 4 Stratus, right? Or 4 Perfect, 4 Aeon, or 4 Eternal. It gives you the opportunity to use that, and on top of that, you'd be able to get better results from getting bigger modifiers, and even in this with less of a damage result. Like, for example, 4 Stratuses is like about as equivalent to 3 Stratuses and 2 Cloud, if not a little bit better, because you would get less damage on things like Stormblades, for example, right? And so you would be able to have bigger mantras at less cost, as well as the fact that if you wanted to, you could always just have a super large mantra by using like a 4 class, 4 Cloud. And also, yeah, Neuro Overload, it's already like, there's some mantras it doesn't work on, But what I think, if they were to add a scaling like this, in my opinion, they could finally also remove the cap on some modifiers or some mantras, right? Like Ice Beam. Ice Beam caps out at like 2 Stratastones or like 3 Strat. It's very small. You wouldn't have to deal with it. It wouldn't be as bad because even if you get hit by a very large Ice Beam, right? Like the full power coming out for burst 1, because it's so massive, it's not going to be doing like a bar to you, right? And so same thing with Shadow Gun. Shadow Gun is extremely quick. The damage, like usually the multiplying spark for the multiple hits for the blast spark, very, very strong. And I think with something like this, they can also finally start to try uncapping. Because you know what? The thing is, right? Some mantras were so busted before at such a big range. Think about that. Some mantras were so incredibly powerful at a big range or big size that they had to add a cap, a hard cap. So they limited what you could do with that mantra. In my opinion, they with damage modifiers being basically on every what's it called, for like the size ones at least. I'm not saying for everything, but for specific mantras that are like super big to where they don't really have any downside for using the maximum, they can add that back. And then on top of that, they can remove the caps on Wind Card, Ice Beam, and so many other mantras. And it's like, there you go. You would actually be able to bring back people being able to use larger mantras, but of course, it would come at a cost. And in my opinion, you still have incredibly high damage as a mage, right? Like for example, I was experimenting with an artillery build. My Thunder Kick did 100 damage with the talent. Like I just did, it would do like the kick, which did 80 damage, and like the little follow-up did 20 damage after, right? And that was on a min-max Mage Thunder Artillery build, right? I did 100 damage with 70% pen. Do you see what I mean, right? And I was still able to achieve 500 health and above on that build. So it's like, you can still get extremely good, what's it called? You can still get extremely good results for Mage. People were saying Mage is going to be dead. I disagree. We already went over it, but I prefer the linear scaling. If anything, bare minimum, if it's going to be linear, just tie on the Stormblade scaling to it, in my opinion. Because damn near, in my opinion, the Stormblade scaling might be it's basically damn near the same thing. And I don't think Mage is cooked. I only think giant AoE Mage. And let me preface something, right? I'll show you guys a clip, actually. I found the perfect clip to illustrate what I'm talking about. People were like, Agamatsu, what do you mean by giant AoE Mage? What do you mean by ganks? I'll give you a 20-second example of what I mean whenever I'm going in a fight, right? I actually found this clip. I was like editing a video. I was like, wait, hold on. This is actually perfect. I remember I was getting like, there was many men, and it was super laggy. All these motherfuckers right now. And
it's terrible game design.
Yeah. I can't move. I was getting hit. I'm actually stuck. You can barely tell what's going on, bro. Yeah, like I said, this is what I mean by like, yeah, you see what I mean, right? It's just a lot of cases, this is what you're running into in the war servers, bro. Be real, bro. People will be like, you know what I'm saying? Just pull up. If you pull up on a non-mage build or a non-min-max sustain build, chat. Be real. Do y'all think, and we were equal numbers, do y'all think y'all surviving that? And like I said, they can always go through and nerf, what's it called? They can always go through and nerf all these like mantras or like rework them specifically. What I'm trying to say is that I think the casual player hasn't really run into a lot of these builds on their own time. And I think a lot of people are thinking like their builds are catching strays, right? Their builds are catching strays. And they feel as if like the damage to modifiers is unjustified. Well, really, it's just size modifiers, and it's only for a couple of mantras too. It's not even for like every single mantra. People are like, dude, what? No, they're nerfing. It's actually not for every mantra. It's only for the mantras on the list. And the reason why, and the funny thing is, there are a couple of mantras that have been left out of that list, guys. That's the thing. This, especially the Stormblade scaling, some mantras already have this. The 22 point, some mantras already have linear scaling. That's why they weren't included on the list, bro. These mantras in specific, I feel like you can, if they wanted to leave out a couple on here that isn't as bad, like for example, Ashlam, if they wanted to cut that out, okay. But I'm talking about a lot of these, the problem is like you nerf one of them, they move on to the next. You see what I'm saying? And so the idea is as a whole, it's almost like, it's not even just like target, it's like you open up more possibilities by having bigger mantras that are allowed to exist again. They can remove the capped, but no longer will it be you have the same damage at such a big range. And so yeah, I was always wondering like why the artificial caps. And so yeah, you'd be able to have full power Kamehameha Ice Beam again.
If y'all enjoyed the video, make sure to go click on these other videos, man. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.